Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who's not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing occurs except by his will, both good and bad, he destined to happen. He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light, he's not a spirit, he has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled master, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension, and help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in the book, The Straight Path, As-Sirat al-Mustaqim, written by the very great, huge scholar of our times, the Shaykh, the Allama, the Muhaddith, Abdullah al-Harari. May Allah have mercy on him. Ameen. In the text, we wrapped up last week the story of Lady Rahma, and we mentioned how her story, which is a confirmed historical fact, is an evidence that causes and effects are not necessarily linked, that the cause may occur and the effect may not occur. Okay, and this is a proof, therefore, that causes do not create their effects, but rather Allah is the one who creates the causes. Allah is the one who creates the effects. And if he wills, he has the power to create one without the other. Also, this is why we do not refer to Allah as a cause. You'll find some people, they say Allah is the first cause, or they'll say the uncaused cause. People say things like this, or they call it Allah a reason. They say he's the reason for the universe existing. Okay, these terms are not permissible for us to use about Allah. Remember, there's a rule in Islam that we do not refer to Allah by any term unless he referred to himself by that term, or his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam referred to him by that term, or there's unanimous agreement of the scholars that it's permissible to refer to Allah by that term. None of these three are true about the word sabab, which means cause, nor about the word illah, which means reason. So it is not permissible for us to refer to Allah with these words. Not the least of which is because causes and reasons are created things. Allah creates causes. Allah creates reasons. Okay, if you say that Allah is a cause or that Allah is a reason, you're indirectly saying that Allah is a created thing. Okay, so let us, remember to be extremely careful with the language we use when we refer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That said, since we wrapped up that story of Lady Rahma, we are now on page 226 in the book. We are now on page what? 226. Page 226. This chapter has the title Tanbihun Muhim, means important notice. This is a very short chapter, mashallah, but it is extremely important. Okay, I'm going to need to ask everyone to pay very close attention because it deals with the question of kufr and people leaving Islam, which is something that, we keep going back to from time to time at various points in the book. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, said, "The ignorant person is not excused from what we mentioned of the basics of the religion, and he is not pardoned for what he commits of blasphemy because of his lack of care about the religion." What does that mean? What the author here, may Allah have mercy on him, is saying is that, let's say you have a Muslim who's ignorant, okay? He doesn't know that saying certain things take you out of Islam. For example, he doesn't know that insulting Allah will take you out of Islam. Okay, he doesn't know, for example, that referring to humans as God's children is something that takes you out of Islam, because that's an insult to Allah. He doesn't know that. He's ignorant of this very basic Islamic teaching. He's ignorant of it. There are some people who would claim that because he didn't know it takes you out of Islam, that therefore he's safe. He doesn't go out of Islam for saying that because he didn't know. They act like his ignorance is an excuse. This is what some people say. But what did the author say? Let's read it again. He said, "The ignorant person is not excused from what we mentioned of the basics of the religion." Okay, the basics of the religion. Okay, we're talking in this case about like the meaning of the two shahadas, the meaning of La ilaha illallah, the meaning of Muhammadur Rasulullah. These are the basics of the religion. If a person is ignorant of those two sentences and what's necessarily understood from them, he is not excused for that. Okay, this is something that every Muslim has an obligation to know. He's not excused. Just because he was lazy and he didn't study and he didn't go to the masjid or he didn't find a teacher or his parents didn't teach him or whatever the reason is, he was the one who fell short by not learning the things that Allah obligated him to learn. Okay? And because of that, he is not excused. Okay, just think about it. If ignorance were an excuse such that it would keep us safe, then it would be better for the person to be ignorant than it would be for him to be knowledgeable. Okay, if that's the case, everybody would just be safe by not learning anything. Then they could do whatever they want. Okay, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so let's talk about what the scholars actually said. Okay, the scholars, mashallah, they said, if an ignorant person insults Allah, not knowing the ruling that doing so takes one out of Islam, we do not say that he is excused. We do not say that he did not blaspheme just because he was ignorant. Okay, ignorant of the ruling, that is. Okay, we don't say that. In fact, many scholars said explicitly a sentence that means no one is excused for kufr due to ignorance. What did they say? They said no one is excused for committing kufr due to ignorance. Okay, this is the expression, or this is in meaning what the Malikis said. And among the Malikis who said that is the very famous scholar Al-Qadi Iyad. This is what the Shafi'is said, and among the Shafi'is who said that is a very famous scholar, Ibn Hajar. And this is what the Hanafis said as well. In fact, some of the Hanafis said the saying that the one who intentionally says kufr but doesn't know that it is kufr is excused is not correct. Okay, so some Hanafis, they like reference the fact that some people are saying that if you didn't know it takes you out of Islam, then it's excused and it won't take you out of Islam. You know, some of the Hanafis specifically said this statement is not correct. It's contrary to the truth. Okay, so this is something that we all need to understand and we all need to be frightened of. Okay, any one of us might say something and end up leaving Islam because of what we said, even though we had no idea that what we said was kufr. In fact, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a hadith narrated by Imam at-Tirmidhi, he said, إن العبد لا يتكلم بالكلمة لا يرى بها بأسا يهوي بها في النار 70 خريفا. He said, truly a slave might say a word, might say a sentence, and not see anything wrong with what he said. But because of it, he falls a distance of 70 years in hellfire. This doesn't mean he stays in hellfire for 70 years. It means he falls for 70 years until he hits the bottom of hellfire, because that's how deep hellfire is. If a person is thrown into hell, it's 70 years later when he finally hits the bottom. Okay, this person, the bottom of hell, it's only for kafirs. So what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying here is that a person might say something and not see anything wrong with what he said. Meaning he didn't think what he said was kufr. He didn't think it took him out of Islam. He didn't think it was an enormous sin either. He didn't think it was a small sin either. He didn't think it was makruh. He didn't even think it was bad manners. Okay, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said a person might say something and not see anything wrong with it, but because of it, end up becoming a kafir and go into hell. Okay, this is a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there's another one like it narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna al-abda liyatakallamu bil kalimati لا يتبين فيها يزل فيها في النار أبعد مما بين المشرق والمغرب." The version that's in Al-Bukhari and Muslim, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, truly the slave might say a word and not see anything wrong with it, but because of it he falls into hellfire a distance greater than what's between the east and the west, which is also another way of saying he goes to the bottom of hellfire, which is where only kafirs go. So after this hadith narrated by Bukhari, Muslim, and a version narrated by At-Tirmidhi, it is very obvious, okay, that it's unacceptable for someone to say that if he didn't know it takes him out of Islam, then that's an excuse. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the opposite. Said he might not know, he might not see anything wrong with what he said, but he still becomes a kafir. All right, this is a frightening thing to understand, and this is something that we need to always keep in mind, and we need to always think before we speak and think before we act. Okay, this is how we keep ourselves safe. MashaAllah. And I remind you that for the one that leaves Islam, the only way to return to Islam is by saying the shahadas with the intention of returning to Islam. Okay, it's not enough just to say the shahadas like in your salat. You know how at the end of the salat we say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. We say this in the salat. Okay, but when we say it in the salat, we're not saying it with the intention of entering Islam. Okay, no one says the shahada with the intention of entering Islam if they don't know that they're out of Islam. Okay, you need to know that you've left Islam in order for you to have the intention of entering Islam by saying it. Okay, that's why it's very important for you to know the ruling of the things you say, to know if you've said something in the past that takes you out of Islam, to know if you've believed something in the past that takes you out of Islam, to know if you've done something in the past that takes you out of Islam, so that you can know what your status is, and then you can correct it. But if you don't know the ruling, there's nothing you can do. If you don't know the ruling, there's nothing you can do. Okay, this is why we need to learn, and we need to not act and not speak unless we already know that what we're saying, we're doing, is something that's acceptable in the religion. MashaAllah. And know that this example I gave when I mentioned the Malikis and the Hanafis and the Shafi'is, the example was about someone insulting Allah, but know that the same rule applies to every kind of kufr. Whether you were insulting Allah, or whether you were insulting a prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or whether you were insulting an angel, or whether you were insulting the religion of Islam itself, all of these are types of blasphemy. types of kufr. And in all of these cases, the person is not excused for ignorance. Okay, this life is not a game. This life is a test. Okay, and we need to watch what we say. And unfortunately, we live in a time where a lot of people are constantly repeating kufr. How many people on the internet refer to themselves as goddess, for example? That's kufr. Okay, how many people refer to humans as sons and daughters of God? That's kufr. Okay. How many people say Allah is in a place? That's kufr. How many people say Allah is in a direction? That's kufr. How many people say Allah goes up and down? That's kufr. Okay? Be careful about what we say. How many people, when they get surprised, they say holy and then say shit? Did anything in Islam declare human excrement to be holy? No. The religion declares excrement to be what? Holy. Okay, we need to be extremely careful with what we say. Think before we speak. MashaAllah. And another thing I'll mention is that it doesn't even matter if you believe what you're saying. Sometimes a person might say something. He doesn't really believe what he's saying, but he says it, maybe to get a laugh or maybe, for some other reason. Okay. He thinks, since he doesn't actually believe it in his heart, that it's not going to take him out of Islam. No. That's not the case. Okay. Speech is a way that a person can leave Islam, even if he doesn't believe what he's saying. Just like a belief is a way to leave Islam, even if he never speaks what he believes. Okay, they don't have to both occur. Okay, you don't have to speak it and believe it. One or the other is enough. Just like a kufr action is enough, even if you didn't say anything or believe the implication of your action. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure I made very clear. Okay, there are certain things that take one out of Islam, and ignorance is not an excuse. However, after talking about that and kind of trying to drill that home, I will mention that there are some exceptions. There are some cases where a person might say something that's kufr, and he does not leave Islam. Okay, way back near the beginning of the book, we mentioned 5 exceptions to that rule. 5 exceptions where a person might say something that's kufr, but he doesn't leave Islam for it. Who remembers those 5 things from early in the book? One of them was the slip of the tongue. The slip of the tongue. Like imagine someone was trying to say, we are all slaves of God. He was trying to say we're all slaves of God, but instead we're all children of God is what came out of his mouth. That's not what he wanted to say. He was trying to say slaves of God, but the wires got crossed and the wrong thing came out. It's called a slip of the tongue. Or like if someone wanted to say I'm the slave of God and what came out of his mouth by mistake is God is a slave of me or something like that. This is what we call a slip of the tongue. The words that came out of the person's mouth are kufr, but the person did not leave Islam because that's not what he told his mouth to speak. Okay, what's the second exception we mentioned earlier in the book? The case of the person who is insane. Okay, if a person has lost his mind, and no longer knows what he's saying or doing, then the words that are coming out of his mouth, even if they are kufr, they don't take the person out of Islam because he doesn't know what he's saying. What was the third exception that we mentioned earlier in the book? The example of the person who is being compelled against his will by threat of death or something that leads to death. Like if someone puts a gun to your head and tells you to curse Allah or else I'm going to kill you. and you believe he's going to do it, and there's no way for you to get out of this situation except to say what he wants you to say, and you hate it when you say it. In this case, this person spoke kufr, but he did not go out of Islam because he was compelled to do it. Okay, that was the third case. What was the fourth case? Someone put a comment mentioning before puberty. Being before puberty is not one of the cases. Okay, before puberty, a person is not accountable. Okay, it's a little bit different. We're not going to talk about the before puberty case right now. So far, we mentioned slip of the tongue, insanity, compulsion. The fourth case that we mentioned is the case of quoting someone else's kufr. Okay, so during the course of all these videos, you've seen me many times quote things that Wahhabis say, or quote things that Mu'tazila say, or quote things that Christians say that are kufr. Okay, but these things that I'm quoting, they're not attributed to me because I use an expression that signifies that what I'm saying, it's not my words, it's someone else's words. So if I say the Wahhabis claim that Allah is in a place, okay, by saying the Wahhabis claim, I was indicating that the sentence that follows after it is not my claim. It's not what I'm saying. It's what someone else said. Okay, so in that example, kufr may have come out of my mouth, but I don't leave Islam for it because I put into my sentence something that indicates that these words are not my own, but they came from someone else. The fifth case, the fifth exception, where someone might speak kufr but not leave Islam from it, is the case where the person was making ijtihad in trying to understand the religious text, like trying to understand the Quran or the Hadith, and he misunderstood it and ended up believing or saying something that's kufr. In this case, the fact that he was making ijtihad will save him from leaving Islam as long as the issue he was talking about is not something that's extremely clear in the religion. Okay, if something is known and certain in the religion, then he will still commit blasphemy. For example, if someone said that there are two creators because he read something in the Quran that made him think there's two creators, he misunderstood it. Okay, this person is a kafir. This person leaves Islam. Okay, he leaves Islam. It doesn't matter that he misunderstood the text. Okay, this is something that is clear. This is a clear Islamic teaching that everyone knows, that there is one God. Okay, so if you go against that, then the fact that you're making ijtihad will not save you. Okay, similarly, if someone claims that Allah is in a place or goes up and down, these are things that are clear in the religion. Okay, even if it was the result of ijtihad, this will not save a person from leaving Islam because this is something that's clear in the religion. These are the 5 exceptions that we mentioned earlier in the book. There's also one more exception, which we're going to mention in a few minutes, but I'll just give you a sneak peek now. And that is, if the kufr did not pertain to the basic meaning of the 2 shahadas, but rather the kufr was in something that you could not have known unless you were informed of it, then if you have never been informed of it, then it's not kufr for you to reject that Islamic teaching. For example, if you never heard, for example, that pork is forbidden for Muslims to eat. You never heard that. Maybe you're a brand new Muslim. You just took Shahada yesterday. You didn't know that Islam teaches pork is forbidden. Okay? Or maybe you've been a Muslim your whole life, but still, you never heard that pork is forbidden. So you didn't know that. And then because you didn't know it, because you never heard it, you denied it. someone said to you, Muslims say pork is forbidden, and you turned around and said, what? No, they don't. Islam permits pork. Ordinarily, saying that is kufr. Saying that takes you out of Islam because you're rejecting the religion. Everyone knows that Allah and his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade the eating of pork. This is something everyone knows is true about Islam. So if you reject it, if you consider that teaching false, then what you're actually doing is you're saying that the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam taught falsehood. You're saying that Allah is wrong. You're saying that Islam is false. And it takes you out of Islam. Okay, it takes you out of Islam. This is why normally saying something like that is, in fact, kufr. But if you truly never heard that pork is forbidden, then you don't leave Islam. Why? Because it's not your intention to consider Islam false. Rather, you just don't know what Islam teaches. Okay? Whereas the person who knows that the Muslims say pork is forbidden and he still rejects it, well, then this person is rejecting Islam itself. Whereas the one who doesn't know that that's what the Muslims teach, this person is not rejecting Islam. He's just ignorant of what Islam teaches. This is the case, this case here that we're describing, this is the case where ignorance can save a person from leaving Islam. This is the case where ignorance can save a person from leaving Islam. Let me say it again. What is the case where ignorance can save a person from leaving Islam? It's the case where he rejects a well-known Islamic teaching. Okay? But only because he doesn't know that it is an Islamic teaching. Okay, normally this kind of thing would happen with a new Muslim. Okay, but honestly, nowadays, ignorance is so widespread that even people born Muslim have like gaps in their Islamic knowledge to the point where things that you would think everybody knows, they might not know. This is the case where ignorance can prevent a person from leaving Islam, but it's not, what did I say before? This is only if the thing he's rejecting is something that you can only know by being informed of it. This is why if you weren't informed of it, then it's an excuse for you. But there are certain things in this religion that, how do I put it? They're so fundamental because they pertain to the basic meaning of the two shahadas. They're so fundamental that if you reject those things, you simply don't qualify as a believer. You know, like if someone thinks that Allah is a statue, okay, because no one ever told him that Allah is not a statue, so he thinks Allah is a statue. Okay, this person is a kafir. The fact that he's ignorant of the Islamic teaching will not somehow make him be a believer. Okay, that person is a kafir because he just doesn't meet the minimum definition of a believer if he believes Allah is a statue, or if he believes there's something Allah is not able to do, or if he believes there's something that Allah does not know, or if he believes that there's some creation that has a similarity to Allah. For example, these are all examples of things that are so fundamental that the person who denies these teachings, that person is a kafir, even if he was ignorant that that's what Islam teaches, because those things are so fundamental. You know, or like if someone denies that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a prophet, or if someone believes that Muhammad alaihi salatu wasallam was a liar, okay, or that he had, you know, poor manners or something like that, these things would take a person out of Islam even if they were ignorant, because those things are the most fundamental parts of the religion. All right, so let's read what it says in the book. It says, had ignorance been a means to avoid punishment, then ignorance would be better than knowledge. And that is against the saying of the exalted, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, which means, So in my book, it says, "O Muhammad," but it really should say, "O Muhammad." The word "say" is missing. It means, "Say, O Muhammad, are the people who know equal to the people who do not know?" This, of course, is a rhetorical question. It's a way of forcing you to admit that the ones who have knowledge are not equal to the ones who lack knowledge. Okay, the ones who have knowledge have a higher status and are in a better position than the ones who lack knowledge. This ayah is conclusive proof that it's better to have knowledge than to be without knowledge, which is yet another reason, in addition to the hadith I mentioned, it's another reason to know that it simply cannot be true that ignorance categorically saves a person from leaving Islam. Because if that were the case, it'd be better to be ignorant than to be knowledgeable, which is the opposite of what Allah teaches in the Quran. It says, however, one who is newly acquainted with Islam, okay, someone who's a brand new Muslim, they just became Muslim 2 hours ago, or 2 days ago, or 2 months ago. Okay, so if someone's a new Muslim, there's going to be a lot of Islamic teachings they haven't heard yet. There's going to be a lot of Islamic teachings they haven't heard yet. Okay, this is the kind of person that falls into the exception I mentioned. If he rejects something because he never heard it, okay, and the thing he's rejecting does not pertain to the basic meaning of the 2 shahadas, it's something other than that, well, then we say, yes, his ignorance saves him. We say that person does not leave Islam. Okay, that person does not leave Islam. Why? Because he's a new Muslim. But let me read this sentence again. It says, however, one who is newly acquainted with Islam, meaning a brand new Muslim, it says, or similar to him, or someone that's similar to a new Muslim. What does that mean? How can someone be similar to a new Muslim? Well, when we say someone who's like a new Muslim, we mean someone who's not a new Muslim. He's been Muslim for a long time, maybe even born Muslim. Okay, he might even live in a country where almost everybody is Muslim, but for whatever reason, he was not taught the matters of the religion. And so on whatever subject, the particular thing that he rejected, he never heard that the thing he rejected is the true Islamic teaching. He never heard that. And so when he rejected it, he wasn't rejecting something he knew to be the Islamic teaching. Rather, he was rejecting something that he thought to be just some kind of random thing. Okay, that person does not leave Islam. That person does not leave Islam because for that particular issue that he spoke on, he's like a new Muslim because he never heard it. And there are people like that. You know, one of my sheikhs, may Allah preserve him, he told the story of how there was a college student in Beirut, Lebanon. This college student was at the table talking to his friends, and the subject of making salat came up. And when they were talking about salats, one of the friends mentioned the 5 salats that we pray every day. And this one boy said, "What are you talking about? There's only 4 salats." And then the other kids looked at him like he's crazy, like, "There's 5 salats, bro. What are you talking about?" And this guy insisted there's only 4. And then, you know, they started naming the salats and things, and it turns out that the person who was saying there's 4 salats, he did not know that there was a salat called Fajr. He didn't know there was one that you pray early in the morning. He never prayed it his whole life. He didn't know it existed. He thought there were just 4 salats. And what makes it even more crazy is this person's father was the imam of a masjid. His father was the imam of a masjid. But the father never sat down and taught the son about the salats. So the son reached the age where he was in college when he first heard that there's an obligatory salat called Fajr. Okay, in this case, this person is like a new Muslim. even though he's been Muslim his whole life, and even though he grew up in a country with a lot of Muslims, he's like a new Muslim, meaning that he simply never heard about the Salat of Fajr. So when he denied that it's an obligation, he did not leave Islam. In his case, ignorance saved him. Because if he had known that the proper Islamic teaching is that Fajr is an obligation and still rejected that it's an obligation, he would have become a kafir for that. But since he didn't know, he does not become a kafir. Rather, in this case, he's guilty of the sin of speaking without knowledge, which is an enormous sin, not blasphemy. So let's read the sentence again from the beginning. It says, however, one who is newly acquainted to Islam or similar to him does not blaspheme for denying the obligation of the prayer, the prohibition of wine, and the like. When he says and the like, he means the things that are well known in the religion, the things that everybody knows are the proper Islamic teachings. Okay? If you ask like random Muslims whether they were educated in Islam or not educated in Islam, there's certain things just everybody knows. We all know you can't eat pork. We all know you can't drink wine. We all know you can't commit zina. We all know you're supposed to avoid interest. All right? We all know that lying is haram. Okay, we all know you have to fast in Ramadan. We all know there's 5 salats. We all know there's something called zakat that people with wealth need to pay. Okay, these are things that everybody knows. So if somebody rejects one of these teachings, if someone declares one of these teachings to be false, while knowing that this is what Islam says, that person becomes a kafir because he rejected Islam. He called Islam false. He called Islam false. Whereas the person who did not know that that was the Islamic teaching, the ignorant person, that person does not leave Islam if he denies it, because it's not his intention to reject Islam. Give me 1 second, please. It says, this type of person does not blaspheme for denying the obligation of the prayer, the prohibition of wine, and the like, meaning the things that everyone knows are Islamic teachings. He said, if he never heard that this is the ruling in the religion of Islam, that's the case where ignorance is an excuse that prevents the person from leaving Islam. But ignorance is not an excuse if it pertains to the basic meaning of the shahadas. Okay? If someone is ignorant that Allah has power to do all things, and so he claims there's something Allah is not able to do, that person becomes a kafir, even if he's ignorant. Okay? If there's someone who's ignorant that Allah has no beginning to his existence, so he claims that Allah has a beginning, okay, this person is a kafir. It doesn't matter that he's ignorant of what Islam teaches. Okay, those kinds of things that pertain to the basic beliefs about Allah and about prophets and about Allah and about prophets, the things that pertain to the basic beliefs of the 2 shahadas, these things, ignorance is not an excuse for those, ever. And that includes insulting Allah, insulting the prophets, insulting the angels, insulting the rites and practices and rituals of the religion, or insulting the religion itself, or insulting the revealed books like the Quran or the Torah. Okay, insulting anything that these things are like, there's no excuse for these things. Let's keep going. It says the first obligation in reference to the family is teaching them the fundamentals of the creed so that they would not fall into blasphemy by their ignorance of the creed. Okay, so if you have a family, let's say you're a man, you've gotten married, you have children, you have a family. Isn't it your job to take care of the family? Isn't it your job to look after the interests of the family? Well, the first obligation you have is to make sure that your family knows what the Islamic belief is. Because by doing that, you protect them from dying as a kafir, which is the worst thing that can happen to them. Okay, you don't want them to end up leaving Islam by mistake due to their ignorance, which is something that's very likely to happen if you don't teach them, or at least arrange for someone else to teach them. It says, for instance, had they, a family member, believed that Allah was a white illuminated body or something like that, and reached puberty believing in that, and then died believing it, they will be made to dwell forever in hell as a result of their corrupted convictions. Okay, in my text, I had to add the word be. Okay, a person who believes that Allah is like a white light. Okay, that's what they believe about Allah. And they believed that when they were a child. Once they hit puberty and became accountable, they still believed it. And they held that belief all the way until they died. That person's a kafir. That person's been a kafir their whole life. Okay? Although when he was a child, prepubescent, we would have maybe treated him as a Muslim if his parents were Muslim. Meaning that if he died as a child, we would have buried him in a Muslim cemetery and so forth. But his belief was not the belief of the Muslims. And once he became accountable, the ruling is that he's a kafir because he believes something that negates his Islam. And since he died believing that, he dies as a kafir. Okay, none of us want that for ourselves, and none of us want that for our loved ones. Okay, so let us make sure we learn the proper belief. Let us make sure we learn what takes people out of Islam so that we can protect ourselves and our families from the fire. It says, Al-Fudail ibn Iyad. Okay, Al-Fudail ibn Iyad, mashallah, he was a very big scholar. He lived in the second Islamic century, roughly at the same time as Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahumullah. Al-Fudail ibn Iyad, he was a student of Imam Malik, and he's very famous, very famous for being like a man of extreme knowledge, a man of extreme piety, a man who was a wali of Allah, a man who practiced zuhud, a man who put his knowledge into practice. Okay, what he learned, he did it. He put it into practice. This man, Al-Fudail ibn Iyad, he's like one of the giants that all of the Muslims after him aspire to be like. What did he say? He said, do not be enticed by the numbers of the doomed. Okay, he said, La yaghurannaka kathratul halikin. Okay, he told the people, don't be dismayed by the small number of people who are walking the straight path. And he said, and don't be deceived or enticed, rather, by the large numbers of people who are doomed. What does he mean by that? And keep in mind, he lived in the time of the Salaf. This is the time when the Muslims were, generally speaking, at their best. But even in his time, he was saying the majority of people are committing sins, they're disobeying Allah, and they're exposing themselves to potential torture in the hereafter. So he says they're doomed. And he says there's lots of them, large numbers of people who are doomed. And he said the number of people who are walking the path, the path of having the correct belief, the path of putting your knowledge into practice, the path of avoiding things that are uncertain. Okay, the number of people who are walking the path were few, even in his time, mashallah. So he said, do not be enticed by the large numbers of the doomed. And this is what we see when we look around these days. When we look around right now, at the people around us, what do we see? We see that the majority of the Muslims do not ask their questions to the sheikhs. They don't ask their questions to people who study the Quran and Sunnah, to people who studied the Sharia. No, what do? They look and see what everybody around them is doing, and they do like what the people around them are doing. If something is normal, they accept it as being okay. I had a woman just yesterday try to argue with me that air freshener, like a spray air freshener that contains najis alcohol, is acceptable to use. And her entire argument was, because she's from like an Arab country, her entire argument was, we use this back home. Everybody back home uses this kind of stuff. So that's, to her, that's her proof that it's acceptable to use. She never said, what did Allah say? Never asked, what did the messenger say? Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Never asked, what did the scholars say? Never asked, what does the Sharia say? All she said is, it's normal. It's widespread in my country, so therefore it must be halal and acceptable. Okay, this is not what we base our religion on. Yet, that is exactly how a lot of people are. If you see the masses of people doing one thing, a lot of people get enticed by that and they end up doing it too. And in many cases, that masses of people, they're like lemmings running off a cliff. They're just leading you to destruction. You don't want to be like that. And for us, the black folk here in America, oh boy, we see the danger of that way of thinking so much. We see people whose salats are not even valid and they don't care because what they do is very similar to what everybody else does. And they'd rather be one of the crowd than be safe on the day of judgment. Even though they're not thinking of it that way, but that's, you see it in the attitude. May Allah protect us. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, he said, is this ignorance of the creed the result of the family's love for their children? Okay, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, he's saying, is that love for your child? Is that what loving your child looks like? You leave your child ignorant of the belief, ignorant of the creed? Is that love? No, that's not love. If you don't teach your children the basic creed, you're basically asking them to go to hell and stay there forever. Because in our times, the one who doesn't know creed is certainly going to go astray. Obviously, if Allah wills for him to die as a Muslim, he'll die as a Muslim. But given the amount of kufr that's around us, the amount of influences we're getting from television and movies and radio and school and books, etc., okay, it's extremely difficult for a person to maintain the proper belief until death if he hasn't been taught it and he's not consciously rejecting the falsehood that he encounters. It's extremely difficult for such a person. Let's keep reading, inshallah. It says, the Exalted said, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, which means, I have not created the jinn and the humans except to worship me. Okay, this ayah is an important ayah. It says, the interpretation of the verse came as, Allah did not create the jinn and humans except to order them to worship him. This is the meaning of the ayah. The ayah, if you take it literally, Allah says, I did not create the jinn and humans except to worship me. If you take it literally, that's what it means. But if you want to really understand what it means Allah did not create the humans and jinn except to order them to worship him. To order them to worship him. Because some people, if they read the ayah the way it is in the Quran, some people jump to crazy conclusions. Okay, the Mu'tazila read that ayah, and to them, they tried to say this ayah is proof that Allah willed for everybody to be a believer. They say, Allah said he didn't create the jinn and humans except for them to worship him. So they say this means Allah willed for everybody to be a believer. Okay, this is not the case. We know that nothing happens in this world except what Allah willed. So the people who are kafirs because Allah willed for them to be kafirs. And the people who are believers because Allah willed for them to be believers. So these Mu'tazila are wrong. And there are ayahs in the Quran that are clear about this, such as the ayah in Surah Sajda, وَلَوْ شِئْنَا لَآتَيْنَا كُلَّ نَفْسٍ هُدَاهَا وَلَكِنْ حَقَّ الْقَوْلُ مِنِّي لَأَمْلَأَنَّ جَهَنَّمَ مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ أَجْمَعِينَ. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if he had willed it, he would have given every person guidance. He says, but the word that he declared is true, and he's going to fill the hellfire with jinn and humans. This ayah is explicit in saying that Allah did not will for everyone to be guided, and in saying that Allah is going to put jinn and humans in hell. So, this is what he said. This is what he decreed before creating all the people. He decreed that he's going to put people in hell. Okay, so it's not possible that that the meaning of this ayah could be that Allah willed for everyone to be a believer. Okay, this is the Mu'tazila spreading filth. Okay, but that's not the only way that a person might misunderstand this ayah. There are some people who might see this ayah that, if taken literally, it means that Allah did not create humans and jinn except to worship him. Some people might read that and think it means that the humans and jinn are constantly in a state of worship, regardless of what they do. So a person might think it means that, the people who are stealing are worshiping by stealing, and the people who are lying are worshiping by lying, and the people who are, fornicating are worshiping by that. They might think this ayah means that the humans and jinn are always worshiping. Okay, and this is not what it means. Okay. Another wrong interpretation that a person might reach is they might think that this ayah means that Allah only created humans and jinn to worship him. And since there are humans and jinn who are not worshiping him, they might think this means that Allah failed. They might think it means that Allah wanted all the jinn and humans to worship him, that he willed for all the jinn and humans to worship him, but that's not what happened. That Allah failed in some way, that he's weak in some kind of way, that the wills of the humans and the jinns overpowered the will of Allah. All of these are crazy interpretations. The tafsir, which is valid and true for this ayah, is that Allah did not create the jinn and humans except to order them to worship him, which is what happened. He ordered all of the creation to worship him. And some of these humans and jinn obeyed that command, and inshallah, they'll see their reward in the hereafter. Others of the humans and jinn, they did not worship Allah, and they will see their punishment in the hereafter. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, said, after the guidance came to us, which is the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's the guidance that came to us. Okay, Allah sent him to us as guidance for us. Of course, as a mercy to the worlds as well. But the guidance we're referring to here is him, the person, Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best of all the creation. It says, after the guidance came to us, which is the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the evidence was established against us by him, then we have no excuse. Okay, so we are commanded to worship Allah, and a man came and presented the evidence and demonstrated conclusively with signs that cannot be denied that this is true. And so we have no excuse if we fail to worship him. We have no excuse if we fail to obey him. The Exalted, subhanahu wa ta'ala, said, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. This ayah of Quran, if you take it literally, it means we do not punish until sending a messenger. Okay, this ayah is, interpreted differently by the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. The Ash'aris interpret this ayah as meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not punish in the hereafter, nor in this life, will not punish a person in this life nor in the hereafter, if he has not heard the basic message of Islam. That if the person has not heard La ilaha illallah, has not heard Muhammadur Rasulullah, then this person is not accountable. And because he's not accountable, that person will be safe. He will not be punished. This is how the Ash'aris understand this ayah. The ayah, which, if taken literally, means Allah does not punish unless, it would mean Allah does not punish except after a messenger was sent. Okay, meaning if the message didn't reach you, then it's like the messenger wasn't sent to you, and so Allah will not punish you. This is how the Ash'aris understand it. So you'll find that the Ash'aris, they say that if a person has never heard the call of Islam, the basic call, like he just heard La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, if he hasn't heard that, then this person is not accountable, and on the day of judgment, he's safe. Even if that person used to worship the devil, even if that person used to worship fire, even if that person used to worship statues, that person in the hereafter is safe and will enter the paradise. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not punish those who did not receive the message. He doesn't punish them in this life nor in the next life. That's what the way the Ash'aris understand it. What about the Maturidis? The Maturidis say no one is excused for being ignorant of the Creator. No one. Okay? The Maturidis say those who have not heard La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, they are still accountable. The Maturidis say they are still accountable. They're still obligated to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if they haven't heard about Allah, they must still believe in Allah, because the sound mind, reason, is sufficient for a person to conclude that Allah exists. Even if they didn't hear it from someone else, simply looking at the creation and thinking about it is enough for a person to conclude that this world has a creator who is not like anything that's in the world, who exists without being created, who has no beginning and no end, who has power to do whatever he wills, who knows that which exists and that which does not exist and chooses what to bring into existence. Okay, these basic teachings about Allah, the person who thinks clearly will know these things even if he wasn't told. Even if he didn't hear it from someone else, the person will understand it through reason and thought. And so the Maturidis say anybody who had enough time to perform this reasoning, yet for whatever reason did not perform that reasoning, this person will be tortured in the hereafter. This person is, in fact, accountable and will go to hell for not believing in Allah. So what do they say then about this ayah? The ayah which seems to be saying that Allah does not punish a person except after sending a messenger. This ayah which the Ash'aris say means that if the message didn't reach the person, they won't be punished. What do the Maturidis say the meaning of this ayah is? They say this ayah is referring to a punishment that's called in Arabic istisal. It's like when you wipe out an entire people, kind of like what happened to the nation of Ad, and what happened to the nation of Thamud. What happened to some of the nations that are of the past that are mentioned in the Quran that Allah destroyed. The Maturidis say this ayah is talking about that type of punishment. where Allah sends a prophet to speak to people, and those people rejected the prophet, so Allah destroys them. The Maturidis say the meaning of this ayah is Allah will not just wipe out a people unless a messenger was sent to them first. They say this is not referring to punishment in the hereafter. It's not referring to punishment in hell. The Maturidis say the one who had time to think about it is obligated to conclude that the Creator exists and to believe in the basics of the belief, and that if they fail to do that, they are accountable on the day of judgment and will be punished for failing to believe it, and that this ayah is not excluding that particular fate. This ayah excludes that, a people will be wiped out in this life for rejecting a messenger. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. With that, we get to the end of this important notice, which was very important, mashallah. And we'll pick up next week with the next chapter entitled An-Nubuwwah, which means prophethood. All these classes we've been taking, we've been talking primarily about what? Beliefs about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we're going to enter a section of the book that's going to talk about what we believe about prophets. This section is also extremely important, so please stay with me as we talk through it. If any of you have questions, please put them in the boxes. I saw some earlier, so we'll go through them, insha'Allah ta'ala. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah to those who salamed me. Someone asked, can I give an example of number 5? Okay, I believe this person is referring to the 5 exceptions from earlier in the book. When we said an exception, one of the exceptions is if a person is doing ijtihad, trying to understand the Quran or the Sunnah, and he misunderstands it. And because of his misunderstanding, he says something that's kufr. We said in this case, he's excused as long as his kufr was not in something that's like already clearly established. One example of a case where the person is excused is like alcohol. Okay, you and I today in 2024, we all know that drinking alcohol is forbidden. All of us know that. That's something that's established as being the Islamic teaching. So if someone claimed that it's permissible to drink alcohol, this person is a kafir. Okay, this person knows that the Muslims say, the religion of Islam says, Allah and his messenger said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that drinking alcohol is forbidden. So if this person turns around and says drinking alcohol is permissible, that person becomes a kafir for rejecting the religion. Okay? But it wasn't always so well established that drinking alcohol is forbidden. Okay, when the Sahaba were still alive and people of various Arab tribes spread out were converting to Islam, they didn't all hear that alcohol is forbidden to drink. And there was a case where one group of Muslims, they read the ayah, which is in Surah Al-Ma'idah, that says, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ. This ayah, like if you take it literally, it says, so do you consider yourselves like prohibited from this, from drinking alcohol? It's in the form of a question. Okay, now the proper understanding of the ayah is that this is a rhetorical question. Okay, it means like it's increasing the strength of the prohibition. You know, after Allah mentions all of the harm that comes from alcohol, he says, You know, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ? Like, are you going to keep away from it now? And it's like the proper way to understand it is that yes, 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 we're never going to touch it again. Okay. But there were some people who read that ayah and saw that it was a question and thought that Allah was giving us a choice. He thought Allah was asking, are you going to stay away from it? Like, what's your choice going to be? As if you could choose to stay away from it or choose to do it. And those people who thought that the commandment in the ayah was actually giving them a choice, some of them chose to continue drinking alcohol. In this case, this is an example of a case where we did not say that those people became kafirs for rejecting Islam. It was not their intention to reject Islam. They thought that what Islam really says is that it's your choice. So they, in their heart, were accepting the Islamic teaching, but they were confused about what the Islamic teaching is. Okay, they were trying to accept and practice Islam, but they misunderstood the Islamic teaching. So in this case, we don't consider them kafirs. Instead, we correct them. And this happened during the time when Omar, radiallahu anhu, was the Khalifa, and Omar corrected them, explained to them that this ayah is not giving a choice, that alcohol is forbidden. And instead of considering them kafirs, he whipped them. He gave them the Sharia punishment, which in the Sharia is 40 lashes, but Omar extended it to 80, which he had the ability to do. And he told them, if they go back and return to saying that drinking alcohol is permissible, he said, kill them. Okay, so that was Omar saying that now that they know what Islam teaches, if they reject it after this, they do become kafirs. And of course, the punishment of the one who leaves Islam is execution. Whereas the punishment of the one who drinks again would just be to get whipped again. Okay, so by telling them to kill him, this is Omar saying that now that they've heard, if they reject it, they will be what? Kafirs. This is like a very clear example of what I was talking about, where the person who's like a new Muslim, because he hasn't heard that that's what Islam teaches, if he rejects it, he doesn't leave Islam. Because the thing he's rejecting does not pertain to the basic meaning of the two shahadas. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but inshallah, I wanted to make sure it was understood. Someone asked, what if you're hanging out with the NOI folks? And, they claim that the black man, some of them say the black man is God. Some of them say, whatever the things are that they say. Someone asked, can that take you out of Islam? Well, merely hearing the kufr that someone else says will not take you out of Islam. Okay. However, if you start to believe that, then your belief can take you out of Islam. Or if you start to repeat what they say without using an indication that it was someone else's words, then that will take you out of Islam as well, because it'll be attributed to you if you don't use an indication that it's a quote. Someone asked, what happens if a person writes something they shouldn't because they didn't know? Okay, so first thing I'm going to say here is that writing has the same ruling as speaking. There's no difference between writing and speaking. So anything you write or type, it's as if you said it. So if the thing you said is kufr, or the thing you wrote is kufr, then we ask ourselves, is it a case where ignorance will save you from leaving Islam, or is it a case where ignorance will not save you? If ignorance will not save you, then you left Islam when you typed it. Even if you find out that it's kufr and then you go back and change it, it didn't change the fact that you left Islam when you first typed it. Okay, this is why we should get in the habit, all of us should get in the habit when we're writing things, especially on social media, to use a quoting statement. Okay, use an indication that these words belong to someone else. If you say something, say, one might say, and then put whatever you're going to put there. Okay. And as long as you don't agree with what's written there, then this will be one of the exceptions that prevents you from leaving Islam. But the main point here is we need to be very careful about what we say, and we need to always think first and speak second. Think about what you want to say, run it through all the Islamic teachings you've heard, try to figure out if this sentence you say is going to get you in trouble or not. And don't say it unless it's something acceptable to say. Someone asked, would that be a sin on his father? Talking about the father who failed to teach his son that there's 5 obligatory salats. That sin would fall on any Muslim who was aware that he did not learn the obligatory knowledge and was able to teach him the obligatory knowledge, and failed to either teach him or at the very least, inform him that he needs to go and learn these things. Although something like not knowing that Fajr is an obligation, that's the kind of thing where probably no one would expect that he doesn't know that. That's the kind of thing that everybody knows. I'm sure the father thought his son was taught those things. Even if he himself was not the one to teach the child, perhaps he thought the mother would teach him, or the older siblings would teach him. Or maybe he thought that the child was going to, the masjid that's close to the house and getting taught there. Perhaps the father was the imam of a masjid further away. Allahu alam. I don't know all the details. But once that person hits puberty, it's his own responsibility to learn the Islamic knowledge. Okay, so after that point, it's completely on him that he didn't go learn it. Someone said, I've heard some people insult the Sahaba and the scholars. Is there a sin upon them? In this case, it depends on exactly who was insulted. Okay, if the person insulted all of the Sahaba, insulted them as a group. If a person just said the Sahaba are, and then he mentioned some kind of insulting thing to say about them, to disgrace them, to belittle them, to imply that they're not trustworthy or something to that effect, then that's kufr and you're out of Islam. If you insult the Sahaba, like jami'an, like as a group, that'll take you out of Islam. However, if you insulted one of them, or a small group of them, or some, not all of them, but you insulted some of them, then this is an enormous sin, but it's not kufr. The difference is because all of the information of Islam, all of it, comes through the Sahaba. Okay, they are the link that linked the knowledge of the Prophet taught, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the knowledge that the Tabi'een received. Okay, the Tabi'een got their knowledge through whom? Through the Sahaba. And the Tabi'een spread that knowledge all the way down to us today. So if someone claimed that the Sahaba as an entire group are untrustworthy, then what they're saying is that we can't trust anything in this religion. The Quran might be a lie. The Hadith might be a lie. Everything might be a lie because all of it arrived to us through untrustworthy chains. This is why it's kufr, because the person who insults all of the Sahaba, this person is trying to undermine the religion. Whereas the one who insults a portion of the Sahaba still allows for the possibility that, there are sahih chains that come through the other portion that he didn't insult. You see, so it's not kufr in that case, but it's an enormous sin whenever you dispraise unrightfully one of the awliya of Allah, and very many of the Sahaba were awliya. And the same that I said about the Sahaba will apply to the scholars. If a person insults the scholars as a group, meaning like all of the scholars from all of the periods of time, this person also is undermining Islam in the exact same way, because he's saying that nothing we know is trustworthy. Or for that matter, if he insulted all of the scholars of one particular time, of one era, if he insulted all of the scholars of that era, it's the same thing. He's undermining the religion of Islam because he's saying no information reached us through a sahih chain. Okay, he's saying nothing in our religion is trustworthy. So that would be kufr. But if he's insulting a portion of them, not all of them, then it goes back to the basic teaching that unrightfully dispraising the awliya is an enormous sin, and unrightfully dispraising those who are not awliya is still a sin. And so it's gonna go like that. Someone asked, what about the hadith of the night journey, which is coming up next week, mashallah? When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said he saw a light, this person asked when he went to Allah. Okay, the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam did not go to Allah. The Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam went to a place that was above the paradise, and in that place he saw a light. This does not mean that Allah is a light. We know Allah is not in a place. The light that he saw was not Allah. He saw a light. Okay? Just because he saw a light doesn't mean he was seeing Allah. Allah is not a light, and Allah is not in a place. When the Prophet ﷺ went way up above the paradise, he was not any closer to Allah than he was when he was on the earth, because Allah is not in a place. This is why Allah cannot be described as being physically near or far, because he's not in a place. So there is no distance between you and Allah, not a near distance nor a far distance. Okay? Someone said he's constantly giving dawah to the Muslims, but they like following the kuffar. And that's the other thing, you know? When I was speaking to that lady and all the evidence she could say is that everybody back home does it. I'm like, man, have you looked at your country? You see how many women in your country don't wear hijabs because they're trying to be like the West? You see the kind of clothes that they're wearing because they're trying to be like the West? You see the TV shows they watch because they're trying to be like the West? You see the movies they watch because they're trying to be like the West? You see the music they listen to because they're trying to be like the West? You see the books they read and the things they're teaching in school? Like, these people are hook, line, and sinker trying to imitate the kuffar. Yet in her mind, that's some kind of like dalil that it must be permissible in Islam just because people in the Muslim countries do it. I mean, take a moment and look at the people in those countries first. Are these upright people? Are these pious people? Are these people of taqwa? Generally speaking, no, that's not the case. Ameen, ameen. May Allah protect the ummah. Ameen. Someone asks, is that exclusively related to atheists or kuffar in the revelation of the Quran, according to the Maturidis? The ayah that Allah does not punish a people except after a messenger was sent, the Maturidis interpret this ayah as meaning, yes, that a prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, if he was sent to a people here on the earth and those people rejected him, then it's possible that Allah may just wipe them out. Wipe them out for what? For rejecting the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. So these people would be kuffar. Okay. To the Maturidis, this is what the ayah is referring to. It's not talking about torture in the hereafter. But the Ash'aris understand the ayah in a more general way. They understand it as meaning that Allah would not punish a person in any kind of way, not in the dunya nor in the hereafter, if the message didn't reach them. So this is one of those rare examples where the Ash'ari madhab and the Maturidi madhab have different teachings, But know that this is a subject which is not one of the fundamentals of the religion. This is one of those secondary topics where differences of opinion are permissible. Someone asked, what's the name of the book I'm reading from? The name of the book is The Straight Path. There's a link in the comments where you can order it, sister. Someone asked a question about the phrase holy, S-H-I-T. This one, my sheikhs taught me that this is kufr. Okay, that if the person knows the meaning of the word holy and knows the meaning of the word S-H-I-T, then for him to put them together means that he's saying that S-H-I-T is holy, which is kufr. This is what my sheikhs taught me. I know that there are some who might say something different. But I'm not a mujtahid scholar. I'm not someone who's entitled to have an opinion of his own. Okay, I can only take from what my sheikhs taught. Someone asked, what about the example of a person who wants to kill Muslims just because they are Muslim? So there's someone going around killing Muslims, and he comes to you, and he asks you if you are a Muslim, and you say you're not a Muslim. Even though in your heart you know that's not true, but you say it in order to save your life. Well, if this person indicated to you in some way that unless you say you're not a Muslim, that he will in fact kill you, and if you believe that that is the case, and if you do not know any other way to avoid being killed in this situation, then yes, this is the case of you being compelled to speak kufr against your will, and you would not leave Islam for saying it. But this is the case of what? Where he indicated to you that if you don't say it, he will kill you. Someone said person A starts to doubt by person B asking them, are you sure? Should person B re-say the shahada? So first off, I'm not 100% sure the situation you're talking about. What is this person doubting about? And what was the circumstance? If someone has a doubt, for example, that Allah has power to do all things, that person is a kafir. Okay? He's a kafir because he doubts something that we're not permitted to have doubt about. When person B asks, are you sure? That's a whole separate issue with person B. Is person B himself sure? Did he say that in order to try to get someone else to commit kufr? There are certain cases we need to understand what person B was trying to accomplish by saying this. MashaAllah. Okay, so he said person A asked person B to become Muslim, meaning I think what you're saying here is that person A wants to become a Muslim. So person A went to person B and basically said to person B, I want to be a Muslim. What do I have to say? And then person B said to person A, are you sure you want to be a Muslim? In this case, yes, person B leaves Islam for asking that. Okay, but this one is a very nuanced case. Because if person A has already decided that he wants to become a Muslim, and what he asked person B was, tell me what to say to become a Muslim, so that I can say it right now, then for person B to do anything other than tell him what to say, it will take person B out of Islam. This is because it's a rule in Islam that to accept kufr is itself kufr. Okay, so this person who's a kafir, he doesn't want to be a Muslim anymore. He doesn't want to be a kafir anymore. He wants to be a Muslim. Okay, so if he tells you, I'm going to say the shahadas right now, tell me what to say, and you delay it, you tell him wait 5 minutes, or you tell him go take a shower and come back, or you ask him, are you sure? Okay, all of these are delays. It means that you are happy for that person to stay a kafir for those extra 5 minutes, or however long it takes to take the shower and come back, or however long it takes for him to answer this "are you sure" question. You accepted for him to remain a kafir. And this is for a person who already told you he does not want to remain a kafir even one more second. You made him stay a kafir for more time. That would take person B out of Islam. Okay? Because he was pleased with keeping person A out of Islam for however much time. In this example, yes, person B needs to say the Shahada and return to Islam. Whoever said there is no image, no physical image, but it is Allah who surrounds all things, just know that this is not a sentence that's permissible to say. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it says in the Quran that he's muhitun bi kulli shay, it means his knowledge encompasses everything. It doesn't mean that Allah himself encompasses things. Okay, this is not something permissible to believe. If a person believes or says that Allah himself surrounds the things that are physical, then this person believes that Allah himself is physical. Okay, and this is an unacceptable belief. And even if he doesn't believe that, the words he said mean that. Okay, so either way, this is unacceptable. Okay, however, if you understood from the word surrounds all things, if you understood from that Allah encompasses all things in knowledge, if that's what you thought that sentence meant, then you do not leave Islam for the sentence. Okay, but I strongly advise you, well, I command you even not to say the sentence like that. And I'd like to remind everyone here that historically, the Muslims do not translate the Quran. Okay, the Quran is a miracle that cannot be translated. What Muslims do historically is they try to take the meaning of the Quran and put the meaning into another language. So like what you see is tafsir. But for us, for those of us who speak English, the things that have been put into English for us to read have mostly been put there by Wahhabis, by people of misguidance who want you to believe that Allah is physical, who want you to believe that Allah is in a place, who want you to believe that Allah moves from place to place and things like that. So they purposefully are translating ayahs in ways that don't give the actual meaning of the ayah, but in ways that give a perverted meaning of the ayah. We should not be reading these translations and then going around quoting them. Okay, these translations are not made by trustworthy scholars. Okay, they're made by devils who are trying to mislead you. I'm gonna have to skip that one because I'm not sure I understand. Okay, so the case I talked about earlier, perhaps it's not the case that he was asking about. I think maybe he's asking about person A and person B. They're both Muslims already. But person A said something, which is a correct Islamic teaching. Person B said to person A, "Are you sure?" And by asking, "Are you sure?" it made person A start doubting. Certainly, if person B asked, "Are you sure?" for the purpose of making person A doubt, then yes, person B becomes a kafir for that. But if he did not think person A would doubt after asking him that, but if he wanted, for example, to test person A's knowledge or something to that effect, then person B would not leave Islam for that. But person A would leave Islam if person A began doubting something that's not permissible to doubt about. Like, say he began doubting whether Allah is created by something else or not. Someone said, what of the saying that Allah is everywhere? There is no saying that Allah is everywhere. This saying does not come from Muslims. Okay, the saying that Allah is everywhere comes from Christians and perhaps from other religions as well, but this is not an Islamic teaching. Okay, the Muslims do not say Allah is everywhere. This is not mentioned anywhere in the Quran, and it's not mentioned anywhere in the Hadith. There is no statement to that effect by not in any of our Islamic texts, nor in any of the by any of the sheikhs of Aqidah, any of the scholars of Aqidah. The statement does not exist. Rather, what you sometimes have is there's a portion, a minority of people who practice Sufism who have begun saying this sentence. And what they mean when they say this sentence is that Allah sees everything, knows everything, that you can't hide from him, that he has control over everything. They mean things like that. They don't mean that Allah is literally everywhere. Okay, they mean that no matter where you are, Allah sees you, knows your circumstance, knows everything you're doing, has power over you, has power to help you, has power to harm you. Okay, this is what they mean. But our Shaykh, may Allah have mercy on him, he taught us that if a person says a sentence like that, if a person says Allah is everywhere, we must forbid him from ever repeating it. Okay, because the sentence Allah is everywhere by itself, it does not act like that sequence of words does not bear the meaning that Allah knows everything. And it doesn't bear the meaning that Allah has power over everything. That sentence, what that sentence actually says is that the self of Allah is in every place, which is clear misguidance. It's clear misguidance, because if Allah were in the creation, then he would be in need of the creation, and Allah does not need anything. Furthermore, if Allah were in the creation and he were everywhere, then that would mean Allah is even inside of the idols. And if it were true that Allah were inside of the idols, then why would it be wrong to worship the idols if Allah is in it? You see, like if a person takes this sentence to its logical conclusion, it's very obvious that this is not what Muslims teach. This is something that Kafirs taught, and unfortunately it spread to some of the Muslims. So we need Muslims to be more careful with how they speak, not to say the sentence like that, but to make it clear. Say Allah knows everything. Don't say Allah is everywhere. Someone asked, what is the evidence that the parents of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are believers? There are hadith on the subject where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that he went to the grave of his parents and that they were brought back to life so that they could believe in him, and then they were made to die again so that they died as believers. This is why we say the parents of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam died as believers. As for the hadith that's in Sahih Muslim, where the apparent meaning of it is that the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam said, "Truly my father and your father are in hellfire," this hadith was declared weak by Imam as-Suyuti and others. So this hadith is weak. We cannot base an Aqidah belief on it. And with that, I believe I finally came to the end of the questions. Alhamdulillah. I'll see you next week, insha'Allah ta'ala, same time as always. Yes, someone said, I've heard that Muslims say Allah's knowledge is everywhere. This is also a poorly worded sentence. We don't say Allah's knowledge is in a place either. Okay, rather we say Allah knows everything. We don't say his knowledge is everywhere. Okay, but you can say his knowledge encompasses everything, which would include every place. Yes, if someone says that Allah is in them, that is clear kufr. There's no other way to possibly interpret that. That would take a person out of Islam immediately. Okay? Hulul is not a Sufi teaching. Okay? The Aqeedah of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that hulul, hulul, when I say hulul, I mean the teaching that Allah is inside of everything, or some people might say inside of certain things. But this belief is considered to be the second worst form of kufr. So it's not merely kufr, it's like at the top. Okay, the worst type of kufr is atheism, to deny that Allah exists at all. And the second worst type of kufr is to believe that what they call the Aqeedah of Wahda, to believe that the universe and Allah are one and the same. And similar to it in the number 2 spot is the Aqeedah of Hulul, which is to believe that Allah is inside the whole universe. This is like the second worst type of kufr. Literally to worship the shaitan is better than that. Okay? So no, there is no Sufi who believes in the Aqeedah of Hulul. Rather, that person is a Sufi claimer. He's pretending to be a Sufi. He's what Imam Na'im would call a goofy, not a Sufi. So someone said, why you don't believe that hadith? I'm assuming the hadith you're referring to is a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ was accused of saying, your father and my father are in the fire. It's weak, sister. It's weak. Okay. Just because a hadith exists does not mean that we believe the Prophet truly said that. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If a hadith is declared weak, what that means is the evidence that exists. Like when you look at all of the evidence, it is unlikely that the Prophet, how do I say this? It is unlikely that that hadith is an accurate account of what the Prophet said. Or to put it a slightly more clear way, it is likely that that hadith contains an error of some kind in it, and therefore it's unreliable. So to ask why we don't believe it is because it's unreliable. It's the very same reason why we don't believe the Bible. Okay, the Torah originally was revealed by Allah. Originally, it was 100% true and accurate. But over time, it changed. And the text that we have today is not reliable. So we don't believe it. Okay, if a hadith is unreliable, we're not going to base our beliefs on it. If that makes sense. Someone asked, what is dhawq? This word was not mentioned at all in this class, and I'm not even sure which word you're talking about. If you mean dhawq, like taste, if that's what you're referring to, I don't know what that I don't understand this question or why you're asking it, brother. Someone said if a person denies the return of Isa alayhi salam, by the way, you should not say AS. This is something that is a bid'ah and it's not a good bid'ah. All right, if you want to say alayhi salam, you type out alayhi salam. Okay, and the same is true for all of these abbreviations that people say, you know, SWS or AS or SWT. No. Okay, these are du'as. You say them. You say subhanahu wa ta'ala. You say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But if a person denies the return of Isa alayhi salam, it becomes a question like we talked about earlier. If he knows that the Islamic teaching is that Isa will return, and while knowing that he rejects it, then this person's a kafir, and no, you cannot pray behind him. Okay, but if he never heard that Isa is coming back, if he doesn't know that's what the Muslims teach, then he's not a kafir, and therefore it's permissible to pray behind him. Okay, well, if you mean dhawq by the meaning of tasting, this is something you'll have to ask a Sufi about. If there are no other questions, then let's say La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. بارك الله فيكم. I'll see you next week, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.